Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Reading Planning Commission Workshop Meeting for Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. For Commissioner Wise, I'm alone in the room. But we do have online Nelson DeLeon, Peter Rye, and Will's there. I see Will is there, and I don't see Danny. But four of us are here. So, and as we mentioned today, since this is a non-voting meeting, we don't necessarily need a quorum, since this is an information meeting. Here in the room with me is also Emily from zoning, Simon, our planning director, Jerome, our consultant, and online today with us, here I see we have Matt Fessler filling in.
Yes, I'm filling in for Michelle.
Okay, and then we also have Bethany Ayers Fisher from Public Works and David Bean from the Environmental Action Committee. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, very good, great. So, and then I'm not sure who Jim is.
You have the EAC as well.
Oh, okay, great. So so first item on our agenda here is an update on the downtown strategic plan. If there are any updates on that.
Sure. We've met with the administration in regards to the implementation phase. We gave them a framework of how the plan can be implemented successfully in part of a starting point. And then we also are started on the 139 recommendations and attempted to prioritize them as per the instructions of the administration. With that, we hope to hit the ground running with implementation. A lot of the projects that are identified in the plan are already in, or some of them are already in progress. We will be releasing that hopefully soon so that we can all get on the same page with implementation.
The intention is that once we have finished prioritization and we have gone through with the administration and they have confirmed that, we have the priorities posted so that come next year, 2021, we can commence the implementation efforts so that we carry on from next year onwards. So we are working hard to make sure that all the arrangement, review, and organization is done this year, so next year can open up for implementation.
And two things that are related to that. First, Simon Christrate, Bethany Fisher, and a few other people from Public Works took a tour of Riverfront Park and Heritage Park. And as I explained to Simon, I lived here for 20 years before I really realized that Heritage Park was there. So that was very, very interesting. And one of the things that, of course, was pointed out to us from our colleagues in West Reading is that most of that land is under control of the Redevelopment Authority. With doing events at Riverfront Park, sometimes it's a little difficult to get funding. So we discussed having the Redevelopment Authority convey those lands as part of our development for the part of the strategic plan and development of the riverfront. Also, I got a phone call last week from Tom McMahon from the Redevelopment Authority, who says that the developer who developed Barley Square at 2nd and Chestnut is interested in the Penn Optical building at 8th and sort of 8th Eighth and Chestnut. It's actually behind Eighth and Chestnut, but it's along South Eighth Street. So that, and they want to put affordable housing in there, which I think fits in with strategic plan.
Yes.
But that's something that, you know, we can definitely work on. The nice thing about that property is that hopefully the building will be usable. I mean, the building's been empty for like 50 years. But the other part is that there is a large area for a parking lot there. So parking would be taken care of, that it's all part of the same plot. And I did send out an email about that we can follow up on. And okay, and that's all that I have for the strategic plan. Does anyone else have any updates? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the comprehensive plan, if there's any updates on that.
Yeah, we have officially started on efforts to work on the comprehensive plan for the city already. And at this point, we are looking at the funding that we can be able to acquire for the comprehensive plan. Right now, we are working on an application with MAP, and we have been able to put together the application. We are reviewing as we continue, but the application, I should say, is done. At this point, I'm requesting from various stakeholders the support letters. So we have sent a request to the county to share with us a support letter towards this. But I also wanted to bring to the Planning Commission that as part of the support letters, I will require one from the Planning Commission as well, so that all this can be submitted together as to meet the requirements of the MAP request.
Okay. Yes. Usually just the chairman signs it, but we can have everybody sign it depending on how you would like to go about that. Okay, sign.
I'll share with you more details about how we can structure it based on the request for the property.
Okay. And
That could be an action item next week at our
Yes.
regular meeting.
Yeah, that's it.
sorry, just need to make a note here. All right, okay, earlier this week, we received from Jerome the updated annotated zoning and saldo amendments. Any comments?
Yes, we had the opportunity to meet with First County Planning Commission representatives, David Hunter, with regards to their last comment letter, and we're just able to go through it item by item on their discussion. So the items that you see now in pink highlighted are the ones that have been changed as a result of the Berks County Planning Commission review letter. There were just some other minor edits that were made as a result of it as well. It is our objective is to submit it back to the Berks County Planning Commission for one final glance over. And our planning commission will then have the opportunity to provide its recommendation again to City Council. City Council will consider or schedule a hearing, and also a meeting to consider municipal adoption. It does not look like it can be adopted by the end of the year, but we can do everything on our end to make sure that we can facilitate the general requirements. So if there's anything that anyone sees on the phase 1 and 2 amendments that is in error or not in agreement with previous reviews, please let us know. Just to make sure that we get this considered. If the Berks County Planning Commission does provide a clean letter by next week, I would say that our planning commission can make its recommendation. However, if they do not, then we'll wait until our December meeting. But yeah, it looks like everything's all good to go.
Okay, great. A lot of work on these things. One thing I do want to mention in relation to that is I did send out an email, news story in WFNZ about the Allentown planners okayed the PPL Tower apartment project because that is an adaptive reuse project in Allentown. And that's a very big building. So it will be interesting to see how they handle that.
Yeah, our biggest building and so far has been the one on Wall Street.
So that's yeah, so that. Anything else on those items from the commissioners or anyone else who is joining us? Okay, hearing none. We will then move on to I'll introduce David Bean with the Environmental Action Committee Advisory Council. And he will give us some background into their work on their shade ordinance.
Thank you. So I've been on the EAC since, I guess, 2009, 2010. Have had several stints as chair of the EAC. I'm currently chairing the EAC's policy committee, which is dealing with a number of items right now, including we've been asked to take a look at the current Shade Tree Commission and to propose some what are probably going to amount to some wholesale revisions of the shade tree ordinance. But in meeting with Simon a couple days ago, he indicated that the Planning Commission was thinking about independently moving forward with a shade ordinance and wanted to know what the EAC thought about it. So he joined our policy committee meeting last week. And you know, we thought it's probably a good idea, and you know, we certainly don't mind if you folks want to move forward independently. That's fine. We're here as a resource to provide whatever support you may need. We did draft and council approved an alternative energy ordinance several years ago, which has a solar component to it. So, you know, we're obviously, you know, very mindful of the benefits that a shade ordinance would bring to our alternative energy ordinance. And, you know, frankly, I think it's something we probably thought about at the time that we drafted that ordinance, but I don't think we, you know, fully addressed it. So, you know, we're here to provide whatever level of support the Planning Commission might require from us. Whether you would like us to move forward with that type of ordinance, you know, on our own, obviously keeping you in the loop. If you're going to handle it, you want support from us, that's certainly fine too. Just by way of background on the shade tree ordinance, we've been asked by council to take a look at that because the ordinance as it's currently drafted, many people feel that it's not working. You know, it was created 50, 60, 70 years ago at a time when most of our housing stock in the city was single family owned. Now we have a good number of tenant occupied residences with owners who are not local. And it's creating some real issues with responsibility for shade trees within the right of way, because as currently drafted, that ordinance imposes that obligation on property owners, and that maintenance is not happening. So we actually just had a meeting today at Berks Nature. We're looking to have Berks Nature coordinate some conversation between we and the city and some surrounding municipalities that have dealt with this issue before. We don't want to have to recreate the wheel here, but we certainly recognize that our ordinance probably is going to require the city revisions that would ultimately require the city to step in and assume some maintenance obligations. Obviously, that creates some funding issues because the city is not presently able to assume those responsibilities, but we're sure there are some creative ways that we could possibly, you know, identify some funding sources for that obligation. We certainly don't mind rolling a shade ordinance into all of that work. I guess what we're simply looking for at this point is some direction from the Planning Commission on how you'd like the EAC, to partner with you and to move forward again with whatever level of support you might require.
We also have Shannon, on Zoom that she did a little bit of background research. And so she can explain kind of what she found, and then with her information and what David just stated, the commission can then kind of guide on where we kind of want to go with that. So, if you want to go ahead, Shannon.
Okay, thank you. And I have some slides to share. So I was asked to kind of think about, what a shadow impact policy would mean, kind of what are the options in the city of Reading. And so when I did some research, I thought, we're kind of starting at the beginning. I think the Planning Commission is at the beginning here in terms of this. The EAC has potentially thought about it a little bit more, but I thought I would share some of the best practices or reasons why other municipalities have put shade or shadow ordinances in place. And, there's a difference, although they could have similar impacts, between a shade tree ordinance. What I studied specifically was the shadow impact analysis. So this is something that would come in front of the Planning Commission typically when a new building is being built, and thinking about what types of considerations you would have in terms of dictating or suggesting development options that would impact shadows on the streets or on properties. So I thought I would start at just kind of best practices and end with kind of some of the questions and considerations as the Planning Commission thinks about what to do next, or if anything to do next. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick, if that's okay. I'll walk through this relatively quickly, and then I can share these slides, because I think, again, it's my intent was just to provide some background to allow the Planning Commission to think about kind of what next. So I identified where I, stole these ideas from. So here is Burlington, Vermont. So they have a shadow impact criteria by uses. So as they think about different uses, they think about why would we want to control or promote design to impact, shadows on property. So they think about key civic and cultural spaces and how they want to protect these spaces from new shadowing that would impede their use and enjoyment. They think about private outdoor amenity spaces to maximize the usability of private outdoor amenity areas such as rear yards, decks, and rooftop patios. Think about parks and open spaces. Why would you want a shadow impact consideration? You want to ensure adequate access to sunlight at all times of the year. Thinking about where children play and making sure shadows aren't impacting schoolyards and playgrounds. And then also thinking about public realm and sidewalks, thinking about allowing, a certain percentage of sunlight at different times of the year. So this is, again, just one example of things to think about when we think about why or if the city of Reading should consider this. So in Burlington, again, what are the mitigation measures? So you don't want the shadow to impact the schoolyard. What types of things can you recommend as a Planning Commission that you can put in terms in your ordinance for policy or ordinance considerations? So you can adjust the building and site design as you think about, lot assembly. You can reduce building footprints. You can think about building massing adjustments, kind of the shape and the size of the building, thinking about setbacks or step backs. You can think about a reduction in building height, and again, thinking about placement and orientation. So that's Burlington. San Mateo, California also put some guidelines in place. So again, they're thinking about how excessive shading could affect landscaping, could result in higher energy bills, and less enjoyability of yards or public park areas. Again, as they think about this, they're thinking about building height and bulk and project proximity to neighboring properties, parks, plaza, or open space. So again, these are kind of the considerations that we could be thinking about as we decide whether or not to move forward. In Portland, Oregon, they also have required shadow study areas. And so they picked certain parts of their downtown. So this looks like the Main Street, where that if there's development in this area, a shadow study is required, and the Planning Commission then will make recommendations around the shadow impact. Finally, in Ottawa, Canada, they have a shadow analysis to demonstrate impacts on sensitive areas, and they define sensitive areas as public spaces, communal amenity areas, main street corridors, residential private outdoor amenity areas, and then they think about how this can be mitigated. So they define, again, these are the types of considerations the Planning Commission would think about as you think about how to move forward. You have to define where, so they define development within their greenbelt area if it's over 5 stories, and development outside their greenbelt area over 3 stories. So thinking about how and where shadow impacts should be regulated within the city. And then I wanted to give you an example of kind of their criteria. So when they think about a community amenity area, they define that as schoolyards, public outdoor pools, and their criteria is, and they define this differently for different areas, is the new net shadow must allow for an average of 50% of any communal amenity being exposed to sunlight during 2 consecutive hourly interval times per day, etc. So again, and it's only applicable in their specific study area. So, another example here is a Main Street corridor. And, as we're thinking about revitalizing the city and and Penn Street, this is kind of an example of what they think about along their Main Street corridor, is that no new net shadow could be in any one spot for more than 3 consecutive hours, etc., during a certain time of year. Again, it's when that corridor is in that study area. And finally, the mitigation measures, and this is kind of repetitive, the mitigation measures are similar across the board. You can ask developers to think about reducing height or alternative massing, how the buildings are designed. You can think about a different building orientation, as well as lot consolidation, where you can place the building on the lot. And so this is the final slide, really. So again, I gave you examples of how other communities are kind of thinking about, or why they would think about putting shadow regulations or guidelines in place. And I think as the Planning Commission and the city think about whether to move forward, if to move forward, we have to think about what we're trying to achieve here. I think, again, the EAC can probably speak about this much better than I can, but there's pros and cons to shadows. There's advantages to shadows when we're thinking about urban environments and wanting shade and reducing, that urban heat island and reducing electricity bills from air conditioning. So that's kind of like, that's a good thing that shade or shadows produce. There's also, potential negatives to shadows, and that's, lack of access to natural light. Welcoming open public spaces, you're looking for a lot of light, as well as energy efficiency. So, in addition to thinking about the policy goals, what are we trying to achieve? We can think about what areas are we trying to protect. If we decided to move forward with thinking about this, are we thinking about citywide? Are we thinking about certain areas of the city? Many communities have put shadow ordinances in place to protect, for example, public parks. Or maybe you're trying to protect, your downtown area and making it welcoming and vibrant and full of sunlight. And then, especially in the city of Reading, as we think about, how it's being revitalized, I think we have to think about, anticipated development, what's going to happen in the future. It's not easy to predict, but I think that there's potentially opportunities for new buildings to be built downtown. And so is this something we want to consider as we think about, the what ifs? If there's a building that's built over 5 stories or over 10 stories, would we want to put regulations or guidelines in place to think about shadows? So I'm happy to take questions, but really, I just wanted to kind of put these ideas out there for you to consider, and I'm sure the EAC might have some ideas and suggestions based on what I presented.
Yeah, Shannon, great presentation. I guess I just wanted to clarify many of the points that Shannon raised, we actually did not consider on the EAC. The issue that we were most concerned about from an alternative energy standpoint was solar panels. And to the extent, development is occurring that might limit a neighboring property owner's access to sunlight for existing or planned solar panels. That was sort of our focus on dealing with this issue. But certainly, Shannon, you raised some additional points that arguably fall within our area of expertise, so to say, or responsibility. So again, whatever level of review or support you might need from the EAC, we're here.
As I said, more complicated, a lot more to think about than I initially thought when we first discussed this issue. I think at this point, I'm not sure if the best thing is to figure out what the policy goals would be, or if we need to figure out the target areas first. But that is something that we need to go for in another discussion. Now we have good background as to what the keys are. Because some of the things I was looking at were really complicated, but they were in like San Francisco, California, and really complex ordinances. And I don't think we need to really get that complex. If we have something like, might remember that in the institutional overlay district, it's set up so that the massing of the buildings, of taller buildings, is always towards the middle of campus, so that the shadowing effect of taller buildings in the institutional overlay district doesn't affect their neighbors. We might have to take some.
We briefly touched upon this issue with Albright Exeter Hall, on where that shadow would be casted based upon its building orientation, and they coordinated efforts with us. They also had neighborhood meetings in order to have a discussion on that, since it was going to be a 5-story plus building. We also had the possibility of other projects coming in. So it's good that we would have something in play in order to provide for direction.
And currently, in regards to solar, we actually do have on our applications that even though we approve the solar panel application, it's not guaranteed that they will remain to have that access to sunlight. So there really isn't any protection from, if there's a vacant lot next to someone and they got solar panels, and then someone buys the vacant lot and builds something that would cast a shadow during optimal times. So another consideration.
Then at this point, would it make sense for us to have guidelines, or should we now go for ordinances that?
Like, you need to identify why, like, what goal are we trying to meet with it first, and then decide.
Yeah, I think that in the presentation, the idea of qualifying the type of surfaces that we're speaking about the shade landing on kind of spoke to that. If we could think more about where are we trying to protect, then that could kind of help tease out exactly what are we trying to do here. I like the idea of the granularity too, of saying X number of hours. Are you increasing the amount of shade that's falling on this area for more than X amount of time? As far as any place that's going to be a primarily pedestrian place, honestly, I think the idea would be the more shade, the better. Shade falling on the side of a building is a good thing. Shade falling on the top of a building, maybe not a good thing if they want to have solar panels. Also, I think urban agriculture also is affected. Say you had a plot that otherwise would have been a great southern facing area for a community garden. but now you're gonna put up a big, who knows what next to it. Certainly the city has enough buildings. I think it would be a good thing. I like the idea of providing some sort of leg for someone to stand on to say, hey, wait a minute, you're gonna be blocking my sunlight here. That's it, just a couple comments.
Gives us definitely a few ideas that, yeah, we can think about these and I think the planning commission will start work on this. And then when we're at the point where we have the policy goals and some ideas, we'll bring the EAC back in to for more discussions.
Yeah. This is Peter here. That a lot of the development work downtown is really redevelopment of existing buildings, and their shade behavior is already fixed for the most part, I suppose. I'm really interested though, just in the trees, and planting trees in an urban environment is very attractive and provides, cooling down the sidewalk and so forth. The maintenance of them is a problem, especially if the property owners are not interested in doing so. That I think we really do need to consider how this would get done and to what standard, so that we can have urban trees and they do prosper and look attractive and provide their function, not cause other problems.
Good evening.
Oh, I will.
Hi, you notice I'm joining you through Zoom now because the audio on the phone again was not working. So I had success finally downloading this. So that's working. Great. Commissioner Rye's comments were similar to what I was thinking. We had brought up shade recently from buildings at one of our meetings, but I think and that was very interesting presentation. Thank you. But I think we do want to include the trees as well. I know you had brought up the concern about the roots some years ago, remember, because walkability is one of our goals. And the tree roots with the sidewalks being a concern, along the lines of what Commissioner Rye was talking about with maintenance, because there definitely are a number of advantages to having trees, and having a greener city is another one of our goals. Either through the Saldo or through our comprehensive plan that we've been working on, and so it fits together. So yeah, I would definitely we could discuss more what we're looking for, and certainly take advantage of the expertise from the environmental committee as we have in the past. They mentioned the alternative energy ordinance, but there were other ones as well that were brought before us for our recommendation that we worked very well with them on to perfect, and that were approved by council, where we relied upon their knowledge. So we appreciate them and their work. So yeah, I think that would be a good idea. We come up with the goals, what we want to address, and then consult with the experts, the volunteers we have on that body that we benefit from so much.
On the other hand, we will look forward to a draft ordinance from the EAC concerning the shade tree ordinance and its update. But as Will pointed out, yeah, that is one thing that we have discussed over the years, is that some of the older trees in the city have lifted up the sidewalks. In fact, I tripped yesterday and almost broke my hand. not watching myself. So yeah, if we can identify ways that the city can help out with the maintenance and like sidewalk replacement's pretty expensive. I just replaced my back porch and yeah, it was pretty expensive. So
I had briefly just like on the side with Lester about shade trees. Specifically, I was asking about a couple of trees on my block where the roots are about 6 inches above the ground. The sidewalk is completely lifted from the curb to the building, and basically they're from his perspective is that they're reluctant to cut down a healthy tree. And so I think if we can get something on the books, like an updated shade tree ordinance where it can, dictate where we're gonna get the trees, how we're gonna maintain them and things like that. We can not only plant more, but maybe as we go through and try to fix up these sidewalks to make them more accessible, replacing them in kind, but with better trees, with non-invasive trees, native tree, whatever would be the best kind of trees to put in the street.
And as we get the developments and the redevelopment projects, Lester does review the plans for what we have in the planning commission in terms of what trees are acceptable from the list that the amended list that we created like 3 or 4 years ago. But he takes into account root spread and also the canopy spread, things like that. So yeah, you'd be a good person to keep in the loop on this as well.
Yeah, and these are all issues that we're aware of, and we're including them in our review. I've made some notes here in terms of the comments that I heard, but yeah, certainly rest assured that all of these issues that you've raised are ones that we're aware of, and we're including in our assessment of just how we might recommend to revise our existing shade tree ordinance.
I wanted to mention too, as a tool, I noticed the city of Philadelphia has had conducted a canopy survey, and they can update that whether a tree is added or taken down, or even the growth of the canopy, and compare it. And I don't know how expensive something like that would be, or if it was all done. It was through satellite imagery, but it was a really great tool to measure. So I just wanted to pass that along to the environmental committee if you want to take a look at something like that and see if it isn't something too costly that could be helpful.
Yeah, we're actually already aware of that tool, and as I understand it, the city right now is facing a 15,000 tree deficit for its canopy, which is not getting any better. So all the more urgency to hopefully try and get something in place. We recognize this is going to take some time, because when you're talking about a wholesale revision of the ordinance and basically moving forward with a new model, there are many layers of review and support that we're going to have to go through here in order to accomplish that. So this is certainly not something that's going to happen quickly, but I think it's going to be important and incumbent on us to keep all of our stakeholders, including the Planning Commission, apprised of our progress as we move forward with our review.
Is the 15,000 tree deficit, is that part of the city tree eligibility? Where does the 15,000?
Yeah, that 15,000 tree deficit, as I understand it, is city limits. So it's within the entire city of Reading, its limits. That's the deficit we are currently facing.
I just wanted to hi, I'm Bethany from Public Works. I'm the city sustainability manager. The shade tree deficit is limited to our street tree canopy. So it doesn't include the forested areas and doesn't include the park areas.
Thanks for clarifying that, Bethany.
Yeah.
At this point, we are working on coming up with priorities of what 2025 is going to look like and what will need to be done within the city as part of the downtown strategic plan implementation. Perhaps as we move forward with this, it may be a good idea that EAC is able maybe to sit down with the planning office to discuss when we talk about these trees, like what is the target, say, in the next 2 or 3 years, what are we looking at in terms of, like planting, and what would that look like, so that we can start having an idea of what the city will look like, even as we talk about starting on this effort of planting trees.
No, that's a really good idea. And certainly, we view the planning commission as a stakeholder here in this process. And, we certainly want to obtain input from all of the stakeholders who need to weigh in on just what the final product should look like.
Anything else on this topic?
I just
Okay,
want
I'll turn it over. Oh, yeah,
well,
go ahead, Peter.
yeah, I'm losing my voice here, so I probably don't, I sound funny, but yeah, where I live in the 18th Ward, this is a 100-year-old development. The trees are at end of life. Probably half of them have been cut down, the street trees anyway. A few blocks away, we have Wyomissing, the borough has an active program to maintain and replace those street trees. And so it's ongoing, cut it down, plant a new tree and so forth. Whereas in the Reading side, they're just being cut down and the stumps are sitting there and no replacement is occurring. So just adding to the deficit of trees, which, I do wish that the city could work on a program to replace them. They really aren't that expensive to replace. Cutting them down is expensive. But anyway, yeah, that's it.
With that, I will turn it back over to David to give us an update on the beekeeping ordinances that they're working on.
So at this time, you've already heard from Jim, but I will formally introduce Jim Cole, who is a member of the EAC. Jim was the member of the EAC who spearheaded the beekeeping ordinance. He's got some background in this area and did a wonderful job for us moving this through the approval process. Not done yet, but we can see the light at the end of the tunnel here. So Jim, if you want to spend some time bringing everyone up to speed on where the ordinance came from, what its key components are, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so basically the idea is, I believe the original reason why this was brought up was because someone actually reached out wondering what was the ordinance, which we didn't have one yet. So they were interested in keeping some bees in an observational hive inside of their building that they lived in. I'm not sure what the status is on that, but we took that and kind of ran with it and said, okay, well, let's come up with an ordinance so that we do have something that we can tell people. Basically, we started with a model ordinance that came from the state. It might have come from the Ag Extension from Penn State. And we went through that. We found a couple little things that we decided to tweak. For the most part, it was mostly pretty much applicable. We made a couple of adjustments. There's some regulation in there as far as, of course, seeking a permit. You need to seek a permit with the city. Some little stipulations about how far the hive needs to be from a certain thing, someone else's house or an existing swimming pool, for instance. And also there was one thing in the original language about 2,000 square feet where we recognized that a lot of people in Reading wouldn't have 2,000 square feet, but if you could talk to your neighbors and have a total area of 2,000 square feet and have consent from them, then that would also be an applicable situation. So just some general guidelines about what you need to do to safely keep bees and also a little bit in there about just making sure that people are doing it properly and informing people around them. So that's pretty much it. It's kind of boilerplate, just setting up a permit process and some general guidelines. So I'm sure people have some questions, but for the most part, it's just we want people to have guidance and to feel encouraged. So
So there already
And I
is a state permitting requirement.
Right.
Why have a city one as well?
I believe the state has guidelines, but it's not, you're not required to register with the state as a beekeeper.
I think you are.
Hives are required to be registered by the state, but the state does not share that information with the municipalities.
That,
Also,
okay, that
we
was
are
the,
looking, also we're looking to reduce potential conflicts between neighbors with it. And also by having the hives permitted, emergency management, public works, and our shared programs like the mosquito program, et cetera, will be informed so that way we can reduce any potential conflicts if we're, having to do a mosquito spray or if we're having, a potential firefighting situation where, people are, the first responders are notified that yes, there is a beehive here and, and where it's located and, so that way everybody is just prepared. We're looking to make it more comfortable for people to do, but also the consent from neighbors is really important. Currently, we have at least 15 beehives that I am aware of, and those are mostly in commercial areas up on roofs. But again, if neighbors wanted to, have a beehive in their backyard, it would, for most properties, require consent from the neighbors.
This would be in addition to accessory uses in the zoning ordinance. And so what we would be looking at is the placement of the beehive. It would be considered an animal shelter. The placement of it, whether or not they, have their neighbors consented, if they have certain barriers, either, and then if they're going to use landscaping as barriers, that will have Lester's review on it to make sure it complies with his stuff. So this is more just so we actually have something on the books that if we were to get a complaint, we can make sure that it's been done right. Because even though the state requires them to be registered, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim or Bethany, they don't have to take like a class or be certified or anything to have the beehive. So
No, there's no recognized certification to be a beekeeper
So this would kind of
by the state.
Are you
this
saying
would kind
that
of
there is going to be a requirement to get a certification of some sort, or?
No, what I
No,
was saying was that-
we are requiring certain, the ordinance is going to require certain standards of how many hives, the square footage, consent from neighbors. And
Okay.
really it's just to reduce conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a hive, but I have a sufficiently large lot.
Let me ask you a question. What, in the ordinance, does it have a threshold between what makes this a principal use versus an accessory use?
it's only going to be permitted as accessory to, there has to be a principal use already there. Like, this isn't going to become like a bee farm or anything like that.
Would there be any limitations?
There's limits to how many you can have with it. Because, like Jim mentioned, there's certain square footage that you have to maintain, which is why you're gonna have to get permission from your neighbors. And so, to have more hives, you're gonna need more space, which means more people that you need to notify.
by considering, I don't know this here, but I know they can be quite aggressive, especially during summer, and we're talking about municipality with children with a large population.
Bethany can speak to that.
How are we going to deal?
Yeah,
Bethany, I'm
so
looking
we
at
are
the aspect of
specifically,
this that I'm
yeah.
sure that
so this ordinance is specifically for the European honeybee, and my apologies, I don't have the Latin name specifically. Our native bees tend to be
Apis mellifera.
it's considered solo dwellers, so it wouldn't apply to any native bees. The European honeybee is considered livestock under Pennsylvania law. And they're the ones who make honey. So they tend not to be aggressive, but they do swarm occasionally in spring. So a new queen bee will move, and having an idea of where existing hives are will help when we get a call like, hey, there's a bee swarm. Okay, A, we're probably going to know whose hive it is that is swarming, and B, we're going to be able to put out into our network of beekeepers who can capture the swarm and move that swarm. So it just kind of will help facilitate proper beekeeping. And again, generally they are not aggressive. Now, if you go and try to, mess with our hive, of course they're going to defend it. Most of the yellow stripy things that we have issues with are actually hornets. Again, most of them are native to our area, but best to avoid those issues. But this ordinance specifically is for the European honeybee. I hope that helps.
So you're looking for a recommendation to advance this, I suppose? Is that where we're going with this?
Well, this is an introduction. We still need to, I will be forwarding this to the Berks County Planning Commission for their review, and then for consideration for action probably in December to pass it on to council.
That would get us ready for the spring, I guess.
Yeah.
It's better
Again,
to
most
have
of-
guidelines.
Yeah, I as a sustainability manager, I would rather have guidelines. Most of our current hives are on commercial buildings or at schools. Also the nature place down at Angelica Park, Berks Nature, it has an active hive. And for the most part, we haven't had any issues, but again, as urban ag becomes more popular, there's a very active urban ag network within the city of Reading. We just want to make sure that there are guidelines in place, procedures that people need to follow in order to safely keep their bees. Not only to protection from humans, but also to be protective of humans.
Yeah, and I've also, in my experience, if you have something defined, if there's nothing defined, then people are more likely to not do things properly because they're trying to do things discreetly. Like with any of these kind of fringe type uses, having bees or having chickens. I know I had someone in my neighborhood a couple years ago who they had some chickens and they were just running around the neighborhood, and they said, well, I don't want to build any sort of permanent structure, because I don't want that to, then people will know that these chickens are mine. And it's like the same thing kind of goes with the bees. Like if you want them to do it properly and feel comfortable putting them out in the open, then it's good to just have something defined so that they know, oh yeah, I am allowed to do this, I just have to follow these guidelines.
Does the city allow chickens?
I don't think we have an ordinance for that. Maybe
Yeah.
that's
We
next.
don't permit, no, we specifically prohibit the keeping of chickens within the city.
Although my mother's grandfather always had chickens until he moved back to Mexico in the 90s. So,
Yeah,
so it does happen.
it does happen, and
Oh, yeah.
again, with appropriate guidelines.
Hmm.
We have
There,
something, we have something.
I
to-
get, yeah, I get a whole lot of requests about permitting chickens, but maybe one day.
And I just wanted to add, for the benefit of the public, that we're not only considering this zoning ordinance for the typical zoning reasons that were mentioned earlier, and for a commercial use, it also fits in again with some of the city's policies and what we've tried to promote, which is gardening, urban gardening, because of course the European honeybees are key pollinators. And so
They
it's
are.
something that we want to be favorable for, because we try to encourage, well, we encourage landscaping, but we want to encourage community gardens. It's something the city has long supported, as well as, just homeowners who are apartment tenants that want to have gardens, even if it's only, potted plants on a balcony, whatever. Certain plants rely on pollinators. And of course, we've had the discussion with the work that you're doing with the city, with the pollinator gardens, which is wonderful. I just wanted to bring that context in so the public's aware. I'm sure everybody in the room already knows this. So that's all I wanted to add.
I appreciate that, Will.
Good. Anything else on this topic? Okay, very, very good. I want to again thank Jim and David for joining us today, and Bethany, of course. Very, very helpful as we will be taking a look at these things in the future, because since they will be zoning ordinances, they will have to go through the planning commission. So thank you very much.
I have uploaded the final draft of the EAC of the beekeeping ordinance in the FTP site, so that way everyone can take a look at it.
Good.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks for having us, guys.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much.
Oh, and Bethany, we just want to thank you for the tour the other day.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. I am going to ask you all to save the date for May 2nd. The Schuylkill Action Network, also known as SAN, is going to be doing a stormwater infrastructure tour of Reading. It's going to be a bus tour with lunch. I think we're going to run about 10 o'clock until 1. So if you want to save the date, the invitation will be coming out to you sometime in February. It's a great way to understand what you're looking at. As we're adding more and more best practices into the city with stormwater infrastructure. I'm happy to take anybody on a field trip.
Nice.
I really think that we make good decisions when we can touch and see and feel and smell. So happy to do that anytime.
Nice.
Good. Okay, next up on our agenda, we have the 2025 planning activities, which some of them we've already talked about, including the strategic plan and stuff, but we might have other things that may have overlooked or forgotten.
Yeah, and this is our opportunity to identify and prioritize any type of projects that the planning commission may have. If there's zoning or saldo amendments, or if there are other things that, of course, we've identified the comprehensive plan as a big target. We have our phase 3 zoning amendments, which will be the parking and loading. But there are things like that, but it's something that we should possibly have as a running list of things that we see as big things that So we could share with administration, and if there's budgetary matters, they could incorporate that into their budget findings, but it's something I think that we should have on hand, so we're all on the same page together.
Yeah, and yeah, if there are any budgetary considerations, we should probably figure that out by January or February, because the first teams that look at the city budget get together in January, from what I remember.
But also, I think it is also good for us, especially to plan those activities so that we can schedule them within the various months within the year, so that we don't we don't forget them as the year goes on. Yeah.
Next up, is the 2025 Planning Commission calendar. I've been informed that, Jamar, and the administration are, would like us to, consider the current conflict that we have right now with the workshop happening at basically the same time as the HARP. We have a few ideas for this, but I think we'll type them out and put them in an email. That way we can discuss them a little more clearly before the meeting on the meeting next week, because we will need to get our calendar ready for advertising at the December meeting.
And our regular meeting is fine, it's just that the workshop, we start at 6 o'clock and the HARP starts at 6:30, so in case someone has an application before both, then it'd be nice to give a opportunity for them to meet. Also, just for in case any members of the public want to attend both of those meetings, it provides a gap that they can do so.
So what's the proposal?
Well, we could meet at we could start our workshop session at 5. I've been informed that the HARP meetings generally last a long time, or it could last a long time. So if it does not make sense if they start at 6:30, that we try to schedule our meeting after theirs, because if their meeting lasts till 10 o'clock, that means we'll be in conflict with them. But if we start at 5 o'clock, our workshop sessions generally last an hour and a half. So if that makes sense to everybody, or we have to look for another date then.
Does the Historic Architectural Review Board meet always the same week?
Yes,
Only on what is ours, the third?
The third Tuesday, every once in a while, it may get canceled if they don't have anything on the agenda. But we don't know that until a couple days before, but they always have it for the third Tuesday at 6:30.
And I'm looking back at our for the most part, our meetings last, our workshop sessions last an hour and a half, 2 hour stops. So it's looking at the opportunity.
Yeah. So even if we would start at 5:30, that would give an hour for any presentation that would have to go before both boards. But we'll check with everyone with their schedule, because as everyone knows, I'm pretty open on a Tuesday, so it doesn't matter to me. So
Moving the workshop to the second Tuesday.
Excuse me, Peter?
Moving the workshop to the second Tuesday.
I think that has conflicts with some people. Michelle may feel it has a conflict.
There's also the consideration for the November meeting. It was asked to not have a meeting the week of Thanksgiving. So possibly like how we do in December, that we don't have a workshop, we just have the regular meeting. to not have a workshop in November and just have a regular meeting.
Mhm.
And so that would be, you know, if we'd have to figure out for those 2 months when we would have that, if we move it from the third Tuesday. Like if we can't make it work to start early and we move it, that's also the consideration we have to make.
And then the last thing is also the meeting room.
To meet in council chambers.
Yeah.
No. Which I said the only, they have to, they're gonna have to make sure that the city council chambers is not a freezer like it usually is in the winter months.
So these things don't need to be decided tonight, but I think we should be prepared for discussion next week. And if we can't make a decision next week, then we definitely have to have that decided upon at our December meeting.
Mhm.
Now, the
Okay.
interesting thing, of course, is that 10 years ago, probably, we were asked to hold our meetings in council chambers. And because of the incessant echo in council chambers and that there's not enough people in the room to die down the echo, we were kicked out of there anyway.
I was just going to bring up the question if the audio has been improved for the council chambers, Mr. Chairman.
Last time I was there, it was pretty good.
Well, they can't, the
Yeah.
audio system is that system of microphones, right?
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah,
you know,
there's
there's all kinds of issues with batteries and only two people can talk at a time and you got to turn the light on and, you know, it makes conversation more challenging because most of the time people forget to push the button or, you know, constantly reminding people to push the button before you talk and to unpush the button when you're done talking. It's not very convenient.
Yeah.
And I mean, if anyone, you know, I'm trained on the equipment, if anyone kind of wants to see how it works, if they haven't witnessed it, experienced it themselves. But, Shelley just mentioned, City Hall is getting a new HVAC system, so hopefully that'll resolve that issue.
Yeah, I hope so. Because January is the worst in city council chambers. It's about 65 degrees or 64 degrees in there.
Let's run a test. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this
Yes, I
back
can hear you.
microphone appears to have been fixed.
Yeah, that was.
Oh, that was a good.
Yeah, sounds
good
better.
idea to check it.
I
So
was wondering.
Oh,
go ahead.
this was the main problem we had. This is the main problem we had in the past was no one could hear the people in the back of the room. So,
Yeah, sounds good.
I think
Sounds good.
Yeah, I thought you didn't like sitting next to the chairman.
Mhm.
Back.
Yeah, so just some considerations for either next week or December to hash out.
Also, I have a quick request. We are also undergoing a big lighting upgrade at City Hall that will start mid-December. If I can have your meeting dates, because most of the work is going to happen second shift. So that way we can make sure that we are not in your way. We're looking like mid-December, probably starting around December 15th and being out of City Hall by January 20th or so. So I'm looking for any dates that might conflict. That room will only like that room will only take one day to do. But I just want to make sure that we're not scheduled, that we know what dates are scheduled for that room. So that way we're not in your way.
December 17th at 6 p.m.
Okay.
And
that's it.
And
Okay.
yeah, our next one wouldn't be until the third week in January.
21st and 28th.
Yeah, and hopefully we're out of there by then and on to Public Works.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Thank you,
all right.
Michelle.
Yeah. All right, very good. Next planning commission meeting will be November 26th at 2024. That is our regular voting meeting. We have one sketch plan to review and
a couple of reaffirmations.
and a couple reaffirmations, which are always important.
One other point I want to make that's beneficial in this room is when there's a display of a plan. We generally rely on the big screen for the display, and if we were in council chambers, would we have the same benefits?
We have those computer screens, so if we would have anyone in the audience, they could see it, and then there's also space if they brought a physical plan that they could also display that.
Would the planning commission members be able to see that, who are attending the meeting, be able to see that information?
Yeah, there's Shelley, right there. There's some of the screens are facing towards the tables, correct?
Yeah, there's two of them.
That's correct.
And
There's two that face the tables and two that face the audience so that everyone can see what's on the big screen.
And would the public be able to view? You know, the BCTV
Yeah.
viewers?
Yes.
Great.
Okay, does part of everything I would like to bring up is you can tell if you were here that I must have gone through everything because my paperwork's a mess. So. Anyone else have anything for the good of the order?
I would just like to
None.
thank you all.
Oh,
I just would like to thank you all for your service to our community and keep up all the great work.
Thank you very much, Bethany.
Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, we enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think we do because we've been here a few years now. We've all been here a few years now. So,
Yeah.
no one's been fired. Yeah, no one's been fired. I almost was, but took care of that problem.
This one was very interesting, a little bit different than we usually have.
mm,
I actually really love the diversity of the board we have now. That it's more diverse than it's ever been. And the backgrounds that we have, we can really bring a lot of thought to the plans that come before us and to all the other things that we are now working on.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention one thing. I think in our last meeting, members requested the planning office to look into the idea of Reading Redevelopment Authority solution, something that was coming around. I was able to attend that meeting, and I think what happened is eventually that decision was put on hold through after Mr. Jack interjected the planning. The city council gave Jack and the administration the opportunity to work with the Reading Redevelopment Authority for some time until next year before the next steps are taken. So I think at this point, the administration is now taking on that. And I think with the time we shall be hearing more information about what happens following the engagement of the administration and the Reading Redevelopment Authority.
Yeah. Great. So that tells me who to talk to. Very good. Well, thank you, everyone. Everyone have a great Thanksgiving. It turns out that the day after Thanksgiving, I'm driving to Rochester to see the Nutcracker up there. So, everyone have a great Thanksgiving. Of course, members, we'll see you next week. And
It should be a short meeting, but next week too.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that sounds great. All right, very good. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Have a
Good
nice
night.
evening, everyone. Goodbye.
goodbye.